Joe Biden, who spent nearly 4 decades in the Senate, has attended as many presidential speeches before Congress as just about anyone in politics. This week, I'm going to break down what we can expect from Joe Biden's speech before a joint session of Congress. In 1983, when he was a much younger man, he delivered the response to Ronald Reagan's State of the Union speech that year.
As Franklin Roosevelt said during the recovery from the Great Depression, just 4 words are important now. These 4 words: it can be done.
And of course, in the Obama era, when he was vice president, sometimes next to Nancy Pelosi when she was the Speaker of the House, other times next to John Boehner and then Paul Ryan when Republicans took over. But he, of course, has never been the main event. What most presidents have described as the pinnacle of their powers and influence. The visual of them in the center of the House of Representatives with most of the members of Congress sitting there, paying attention to them. This year it's going to be a little bit different. 2 people in the line of succession after Biden are both women. We will be watching some history on Wednesday night. For the first time, the 2 people behind the president are women, and one of them, of course, Kamala Harris, is a woman of color. Also, because of COVID restrictions, not everyone gets to go. And so it'll be a sampling of representatives from the House that Nancy Pelosi will decide on. And we expect that most of the senators will be allowed to attend. Members and senators cannot bring guests as they usually can. Biden is likely only to have his wife, Jill, and Kamala Harris's husband, Doug Emhoff. Just one Supreme Court justice will be there Wednesday night, and that is Chief Justice Roberts. He'll be representing the Supreme Court. So only about 200 people in attendance. Usually it's about 1,600 people. And one of the traditional set pieces of every joint address to Congress or State of the Union is a box in the gallery of guests of the president and First Lady. This was a tradition started by Ronald Reagan, and every president has followed suit since then. And usually these guests are tied to some presidential priority. So the purpose of this address is for the president to lay out his agenda to Congress. It is also the one time every year where the president has a kind of what is usually a raucous interaction with members of his own party and the opposition.
This too is false. The reforms I'm proposing would not apply to those who are here illegally.
And then there's the theater of the response. Each year, the party opposing the president is allowed to pick someone and they deliver a response. Generally, this has been a terrible job. Very difficult to compete with the setting of the president and essentially one of the toughest acts to follow. Right before the 1996 election, Bob Dole delivered the response to Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton looked young and vigorous in front of Congress. They cut to Bob Dole, who was very old even then, and he looked pale and sickly, and it really set up a contrast that defined the 1996 campaign. Who can forget in 2013 when Senator Marco Rubio interrupted his speech to take a sip of water.
Laid out tonight.
And this year, the job goes to Senator Tim Scott from South Carolina. He was chosen by Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy partly because he sort of bridges the divide between the pro and anti-Trump factions of the party, and Tim Scott, in their minds, fit the bill. So this speech is coming the week of Biden's 100-day mark, so we would expect him to sort of take stock of his presidency so far. Clearly, we'll talk a lot about the progress he's made on battling the pandemic, on getting the vaccine program up and running, and we expect him to deliver a progress report on where things stand with coronavirus. We expect he'll also talk about his big infrastructure, jobs, climate plan that he announced a few weeks ago and that is gradually working its way through Congress. And then finally, the news of the speech that we're expecting is he's going to lay out the second phase of what he calls the Build Back Better plan. The first one was the Jobs and Infrastructure Plan, and this one is called the American Families Plan. What we know so far will be in the plan is education funding, $300 billion reportedly, a big national child care policy that is about $225 billion, a $225 billion paid family and medical leave plan. And then we understand it'll have some $200 billion for pre-K. There's one area that we don't have clarity yet, and that will be interesting to watch for on Wednesday night. And that is the always fraught issue of healthcare. Democratic presidencies have many times crashed on the issue of healthcare. Very difficult issue for Bill Clinton, very difficult issue for Barack Obama. And Democrats right now are divided on the healthcare portions of the American Families Plan. Should Biden include a long-time Democratic promise of allowing the government to negotiate drug prices? This would save nearly $500 billion from Medicare spending. And so that's the first issue. Second issue is if they include this reform of drug pricing, what do you do with that money? Progressives in Congress, led by Bernie Sanders, want to use that nearly $500 billion to expand Medicare by lowering the eligibility age from 65 to 60. And they want to use some of that additional savings from the prescription drug reform to expand the benefits that Medicare includes. Other Democrats want to use that money to shore up the Affordable Care Act. Biden, earlier this year, passed legislation that dramatically increased the amount of subsidies that Americans are eligible for when buying health care on the Obamacare exchanges. That was only a temporary fix, and so a lot of Democrats want to shore that up. So the politics of this are even more complicated than that, because if you go after prescription drug prices, you are going to face the wrath of the pharmaceutical industry. And if you expand Medicare in the way that Bernie Sanders wants to do, you are going to face the wrath of the health insurance lobby. And so part of the decision that the White House makes will depend on how many fights they want to have on their hands at one time. So those are the two interesting areas of Democratic intrigue right now, and how Biden decides those issues will tell us a lot about how he's navigating the Democratic Party right now.